I still remember the first time I asked Ethan if he wanted to come horse riding with me. He laughed, tilted his head in that way he always did when he wasn't sure if I was joking. Me? On a horse? You've seen me trip over flat ground, right? But he said yes anyway. That was Ethan, curious enough to try anything once, even if it meant looking ridiculous. And maybe that was part of the reason I wanted him there. The ranch had always been my space, a quiet world of dust, wooden fences, and the low hum of horses breathing. Sharing it with him felt strangely important, like I was letting him into a part of me I didn't often show. The morning of, the sky was soft and pale, a watercolor wash of blue and gold. He pulled up in his beat-up car, stepping out in sneakers that already looked like they regretted their life choices. He wore a plain gray hoodie, hood down, hair a little messy, like he'd rolled out of bed and decided to let the world deal with him as he was. And yet, in that moment, standing awkwardly by the gate, he fit. Too much, maybe. "You're really gonna make me do this?" he said, grinning at me as I walked over. "You agreed," I replied. "No backing out now." He shook his head, laughing under his breath, but his eyes softened as he followed me into the stables. There was a nervous energy in him, but it wasn't the kind that made you want to pull away. It made me want to draw closer to steady him the way I might calm a skittish horse. Inside, the air smelled of hay and leather, warm and grounding. I showed him the mare I'd saddled for him, gentle, easygoing, the kind of horse that forgave mistakes. Ethan reached out cautiously, palm hovering before making contact. The horse flicked an ear, then leaned into his touch as if giving permission. Ethan's face lit up with this small, surprised smile. "She doesn't hate me," he whispered. "She likes you," I said. "She can tell you're harmless." He shot me a look, half offended, half amused. "Harmless? Thanks, man." It felt good, watching him out of place yet finding his rhythm anyway. Maybe it was selfish, but I liked seeing him in my world, letting me guide him. When we mounted, he fumbled, of course. One foot barely in the stirrup, nearly slipping over the other side. I grabbed his arm instinctively, steadying him. The touch was brief, my fingers closing around the warm muscle of his forearm, his hoodie soft beneath my hand. But something about the contact lingered. I pulled away quickly, pretending not to notice. Once we were out on the trail, things settled. The rhythm of hooves against earth, the sway of the saddle, the quiet that seemed bigger than both of us. Ethan laughed often, mostly at himself, and each time, the sound carried across the open field, louder than the wind. "This is insane," he said, clutching the reins too tightly. "How do you make it look so easy?" "Relax," I told him. "The horse knows if you're nervous." "Oh, she knows," he said, eyes wide. "She knows I'm terrified." I couldn't help but laugh, and he glanced over, grinning, like my laughter had been the reward he was aiming for all along. There were moments, though, when he went quiet. When he stopped trying to make me laugh and just looked, at the hills rolling in the distance, at the sky breaking open with sunlight. Once or twice I caught him glancing at me instead. Not long enough to mean anything, not long enough for me to call it out, but long enough that I felt it. We rode side by side until the afternoon light shifted, dipping into something softer. The silence between us wasn't heavy, but it wasn't empty either. It was full of something I couldn't name, some electricity threading itself through the space between our horses, between our shoulders, between the breaths we didn't realize we were sinking. When we returned to the stables, Ethan dismounted clumsily. He swung his leg over, misjudged the ground, and stumbled forward. Instinct kicked in again, my hand shooting out to catch him at the elbow. His balance steadied, but he didn't pull away right away. Neither did I. For a second, everything froze. His eyes met mine, closer than they'd been all day. They were lighter than I remembered, flecks of green catching the last of the sunlight. His breath was uneven, and I knew mine was too. The world seemed to shrink. The creak of leather, the smell of hay, the quiet snort of the horse behind us, all of it fading into the background. I should have let go. Instead, I held his gaze. Just long enough for something unspoken to flicker between us. Something dangerous. Something I wanted too much. Then he laughed, softly breaking it. "Guess I'm not a natural." "You're fine," I said quickly, stepping back, pretending the warmth on my skin was nothing. But the silence that followed lingered. Longer than it should have. Long enough that when we finally walked back toward the cabin, side by side, the space between us felt charged. Not empty, not safe, but alive. And I couldn't stop wondering if he felt it too. By the time we finished putting the horses away, the air had shifted. The sky had gone from pale gold to a restless gray, the kind that presses low on your chest, carrying the taste of rain before it even falls. Ethan tilted his head up. This looks bad." I nodded. The clouds weren't bluffing. Storms coming fast. We should stay at the cabin until it passes. He raised a brow. Overnight. I shrugged, pretending it was no big deal. Probably safer than driving back in this. He looked at me for a second too long, as if measuring something unsaid, then gave a short laugh. Guess you're stuck with me. The rain arrived before we even reached the porch. A sudden hard downpour that soaked his hoodie and plastered my hair against my forehead. We rushed inside, breathless, shaking off the water. The cabin was small, just one main room with a kitchenette tucked into a corner, a worn couch and the bed against the far wall. I'd spent countless weekends here alone. It had never felt as small as it did now, with him standing in the center, dripping onto the wood floor. Ethan tugged at his hoodie, peeling it off with a groan. The shirt beneath clung to him, damp and pulling across his shoulders. I looked away too quickly, pretending to fuss with the kettle on the stove. My pulse was louder than the storm hammering on the roof. You weren't kidding, he said, wringing out the fabric. This place is cozy. That's one way to put it. His gaze flicked to the bed. There was only one, of course. I saw the realization cross his face, followed by that familiar crooked smile. So, what's the sleeping arrangement here? Rock, paper, scissors? Or do I get the couch as the guest of honor? It folds out, I lied. It didn't? He arched a brow, clearly not buying it. Right. Sure it does. We laughed, the sound awkward but necessary, like we were both holding back a truth we weren't ready to face. Later, after mugs of tea and a failed attempt to watch something on my old laptop, the storm settled into a steady rhythm outside, relentless but oddly calming. We brushed our teeth in the cramped bathroom, bumping shoulders, joking about how we looked like some married couple in a toothpaste commercial. Except it didn't feel like a joke to me. Not really. When we finally turned in for the night, I hesitated. Ethan sprawled across the bed as if it belonged to him, grinning. Come on, man. It's big enough. Unless you're scared, I snore. I'm not scared, I said, though my voice came out softer than intended. Lying beside him was worse than I expected. The mattress dipped with his weight, pulling me slightly toward him. Our arms brushed every time either of us shifted. The air between us was warm, heavy, filled with the scent of his shampoo and something else. Just him. He exhaled long and slow. This storm's kind of intense. Yeah. Silence. I stared at the ceiling, counting the seconds between thunder and lightning. But my attention kept drifting sideways, to the rise and fall of his chest, to the heat radiating through the thin gap between us. Every sound he made, the faint hitch in his breath, the rustle of fabric as he adjusted, felt amplified, threaded directly into me. At one point his knee brushed mine. Just lightly, just enough to notice. Neither of us moved it away. My thoughts spiraled. What if he could feel my pulse through the sheets? What if he knew how aware I was of him? What if this wasn't one-sided? Hey, he murmured suddenly. His voice was low, rough from the hour. Yeah. My throat was tight. But he didn't finish. He just shifted, rolling onto his side so his back faced me. The space grew quieter, darker, but the weight of what he hadn't said pressed harder than anything else. I lay awake, listening to the storm, listening to him breathe. My body begged me to relax, to sleep, but my mind wouldn't let go of the unspoken words hanging in the air between us. And I couldn't help but wonder what it was he wanted to say, and why he didn't. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke to the sound of rain easing against the roof. The storm had gentled into a softer rhythm, but inside the cabin, everything felt heavier. It took me a second to realize why. Ethan's arm was draped over me. Not carelessly thrown, not in passing, but resting with the kind of weight that told me he'd shifted toward me in his sleep and stayed there. His chest was pressed faintly against my back, his breath slow and steady, warm against the nape of my neck. I froze. Every part of me went still, as though even the smallest movement might shatter the fragile balance of this moment. My heart thudded so hard I was sure it would wake him. I tried to tell myself it didn't mean anything, that he was asleep, that people roll around without knowing where they end up. But the longer I lay there, the harder it was to believe it was just an accident. I could feel the heat of his hand through the thin fabric of my shirt. His fingers twitched once, then stilled, but he didn't pull away. And I didn't move either. The world outside blurred into nothing. No rain, no thunder, no night. Just the impossible awareness of his body against mine. Time folded into something slow, stretched. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt this awake, or this terrified to breathe. 100 thoughts raced through me. What if he woke up and realized? What if he pulled away, embarrassed, laughed it off, built a wall between us I could never cross again? But what if he didn't? What if he left his arm there because he wanted to? My chest ached with the not knowing. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. The silence was thick, the kind that wasn't empty but filled with a charge like static before lightning. I tried to close my eyes to steady myself, but every detail kept me wide open. The rise and fall of his chest, the warmth at my back, the faint murmur he made when he shifted closer. And then it happened. Half asleep, his lips parted and he mumbled something into the dark. I couldn't catch the whole of it, just a few blurred syllables. But I heard my name in there, soft like it belonged to some dream he didn't want to let go of. The sound hit me harder than thunder. I stared into the dark, breath caught. My name on his lips, even half-formed, even unconscious, felt like a secret I wasn't meant to hear, like stepping across a line I'd been circling for too long. I didn't move. I didn't dare. Instead, I let myself feel it just for that moment. The closeness, the warmth, the terrifying, wonderful possibility that maybe this wasn't just me. Eventually, my body gave in to exhaustion. My eyes slid shut, though my mind kept replaying the sound of my name in his sleep. I lay there, caught between fear and hope, between the storm that had passed and the storm inside me that refused to end. And I knew, no matter what came next, I would never be able to forget this night. The night when everything froze. Morning crept in slow, pale, and quiet, the kind of light that softened edges but made everything too visible at the same time. I woke to find Ethan still beside me, but the space between us had returned, a thin strip of mattress and silence separating our bodies. His arm was no longer over me, though I could still feel the phantom weight of it, burned into memory like a secret I wasn't meant to keep. I lay there longer than I should have, pretending to be asleep just to watch him breathe. His lashes rested heavy against his skin, his lips parted slightly, as if even in sleep he didn't quite let go. And I thought about the night before, the way his body had curved into mine, the sound of my name slipping from his mouth. It could have been nothing. Or it could have been everything. When he stirred, I rolled onto my back and closed my eyes, feigning drowsiness. A beat later, he exhaled sharply, stretching, muttering a hushed, "Morning." "Morning," I echoed, voice rough. We didn't speak much after that. The storm had passed, leaving the air clear and damp. We packed up slowly, moving around each other in the small cabin like two magnets that didn't know whether to pull together or push apart. It wasn't until later, when we stepped outside and walked the trail back toward the stables, that the silence began to feel unbearable. Ethan was too quiet. Normally he filled every space with chatter, jokes, questions, sarcastic commentary. But now his steps were measured, his gaze fixed ahead, his jaw tight. I finally asked, "You okay?" He looked at me, then away. "Yeah. Just thinking." I waited, hoping he'd continue, but he didn't. The unspoken stretched between us until it felt like a third presence. Back at the barn, we worked side by side in silence, unsaddling the horses, brushing them down. Every brushstroke was a distraction, a way to avoid the question circling in my chest. Did he remember? Did he know? When I couldn't take it anymore, I blurted, "You've been quiet." He froze, hand mid-motion against the mare's neck. Slowly he turned. "So have you." The air seemed to shift. For the first time all morning, his eyes met mine and didn't look away. There was something in them, not the easy brightness I was used to, but something raw, unsettled. "Is it?" He hesitated, chewing at his lip. "Did I do something last night?" My stomach dropped. I forced myself to stay still. "What do you mean?" "I don't know." His laugh was shaky, humorless. I woke up this morning and it felt like..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "Forget it." "No," my voice was sharper than I meant. "Don't say forget it." His jaw worked. He set the brush down, stepping closer, lowering his voice. "It felt like maybe I swallowed." "Like maybe you what?" He let out a long breath, rubbing the back of his neck. "Like maybe I crossed a line. With you." My chest tightened. "You didn't." His gaze flicked to mine, searching. "Are you sure? Because I keep remembering this dream, or maybe it wasn't a dream, I don't know. You were there and He broke off again, frustration etched in his face. "God, this is stupid." "It's not stupid," I said softly. For a moment, silence. Just the distant shuffle of hooves in the barn, the weight of dust and sunlight between us. Then, in a voice so low I almost didn't catch it, he asked, "Would it freak you out if I said I think I wanted it to be real?" The world tilted. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, drowning out everything else. I should have answered right away, but the words caught. Because what he was offering, or maybe what he was afraid of, was everything I'd been holding back, everything I'd buried under years of pretending. Finally, I whispered, "What if I said no?" His eyes flickered, a flash of hurt quickly hidden. He nodded once, sharp, stepping back. then I'd say forget I said anything. The distance stabbed through me. I shook my head quickly. Wait, that's not what I meant. He paused, breath caught. I swallowed hard, voice unsteady. What if I said yes? For a second I thought I'd said it too softly that he hadn't heard. But then he blinked and the tension in his shoulders broke, his mouth parting like he couldn't believe the words had actually come from me. You mean? Yes, I cut in before I could lose my nerve. Yes, I felt something. For a long time. And I didn't say anything because I thought you were straight. I thought I'd ruin everything if I told you. He stared at me, chest rising and falling unevenly. You thought you'd ruin it? And here I've been, terrified you'd hate me if I told you His voice faltered, but he didn't look away. I don't know what this is, man. But it's not nothing. The barn was too quiet. My whole body felt like it was shaking, though I hadn't moved. Ethan took a cautious step closer, then another, until there was no space left but the barest inches. His hand twitched at his side as though he wanted to reach for me but wasn't sure if he was allowed. I solved it for him. Slowly, carefully, I lifted my hand and brushed my fingers against his. It was barely a touch, but the way his breath caught told me it was enough. His hand turned, meeting mine, our fingers slipping together like they'd been waiting for it all along. The silence between us softened. His shoulders eased. My chest unclenched. For the first time in what felt like forever, I breathed without fear. He let out a laugh, shaky but real. So, what now? I smiled faintly. I don't know. But this feels like a start. And then, not rushed, not desperate, he leaned in, resting his forehead against mine. No kiss. Just closeness. Just the quiet press of his skin, his breath mingling with mine, the unspoken promise humming between us. It was fragile. Terrifying. Beautiful. And it was real. The rest of the day felt different, though nothing outwardly had changed. We still moved through the motions, feeding the horses, cleaning the tack, sweeping stray hay from the stable floor. But every glance, every brush of our shoulders carried a new weight. Or maybe a new lightness. I couldn't decide which. We didn't talk about what had just happened, not directly. It hung in the air between us, too fragile to poke it yet. Still, I caught myself smiling for no reason, and when Ethan noticed, he shook his head with that crooked grin of his, like he knew exactly why. Back at the cabin, the silence was different. Not loaded, not heavy, but easy. He slumped onto the couch, stretching out with a groan. Man, farm work is no joke. I don't know how you do this every weekend. I smirked. You lasted one day. Barely. Hey, he said, pointing at me with mock offense. I stayed on the horse. That's a victory in my book. I sat beside him, our knees brushing, neither of us moving away. Fair. Though I'm not sure the horse would agree. That earned me a laugh, full and unguarded. The kind of laugh that seemed to shake off the last of the fear. I found myself laughing too, not because the joke was that funny but because being near him felt like relief. At some point, his head tipped against the back of the couch, eyes closing. I watched him in the dim light, the storm-washed sky peeking through the window. The urge to reach out, to let my fingers trace the curve of his jaw, was almost unbearable. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, he cracked one eye open and caught me staring. What? Nothing, I said quickly, heat rushing to my face. He grinned lazily. You're a terrible liar. I rolled my eyes, but the moment was softer than it should have been, like even teasing carried some unspoken tenderness now. Later we made dinner together, a clumsy affair of overcooked pasta and sauce from a jar. He leaned against me while reaching for a pan, lingering just a second too long, then smirked like he knew what he'd done. When I bumped his hip back, he laughed, almost dropping the spoon. The meal was awful, but it didn't matter. We ate sitting close, our knees pressed together under the table. Conversation flowed easier now, weaving between old memories and small admissions. He told me about sneaking beers in high school, about the time he almost got caught. I told him about the summer I spent practically living at the ranch, about how the horses had become a kind of escape. He listened, really listened, his hand absently resting near mine on the table. There was no rush to define anything. No pressure to name what we were or where it was going. Just the quiet rhythm of being near him, closer than we'd ever been allowed to be. When night came again, we didn't even pretend about the bed. He climbed in first, patting the space beside him with a small, shy smile. I slid in, my body buzzing with awareness, though the air felt gentler this time. We lay side by side, a careful inch of space between us that neither seemed eager to close, but neither widened either. In the dark, his voice came, soft and uncertain. So, where do we go from here? I turned my head toward him, though I couldn't see his face clearly. I don't know. He let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh. Me neither. We didn't say more than that. We didn't have to. Because for the first time, the not knowing didn't feel like a cliff. It felt like a beginning. The rest of the day felt different, though nothing outwardly had changed. We still moved through the motions, feeding the horses, cleaning the tack, sweeping stray hay from the stable floor. But every glance, every brush of our shoulders carried a new weight. Or maybe a new lightness. I couldn't decide which. We didn't talk about what had just happened, not directly. It hung in the air between us, too fragile to poke it yet. Still, I caught myself smiling for no reason, and when Ethan noticed, he shook his head with that crooked grin of his, like he knew exactly why. Back at the cabin, the silence was different. Not loaded, not heavy, but easy. He slumped onto the couch, stretching out with a groan. Man, farm work is no joke. I don't know how you do this every weekend. I smirked. You lasted one day. Barely. Hey, he said, pointing at me with mock offense. I stayed on the horse. That's a victory in my book. I sat beside him, our knees brushing, neither of us moving away. Fair. Though I'm not sure the horse would agree. That earned me a laugh, full and unguarded. The kind of laugh that seemed to shake off the last of the fear. I found myself laughing too, not because the joke was that funny, but because being near him felt like relief. At some point, his head tipped against the back of the couch, eyes closing. I watched him in the dim light, the storm-washed sky peeking through the window. The urge to reach out, to let my fingers trace the curve of his jaw, was almost unbearable. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, he cracked one eye open and caught me staring. What? Nothing, I said quickly, heat rushing to my face. He grinned lazily. You're a terrible liar. I rolled my eyes, but the moment was softer than it should have been, like even teasing carried some unspoken tenderness now. Later we made dinner together, a clumsy affair of overcooked pasta and sauce from a jar. He leaned against me while reaching for a pan, lingering just a second too long, then smirked like he knew what he'd done. When I bumped his hip back, he laughed, almost dropping the spoon. The meal was awful, but it didn't matter. We ate sitting close, our knees pressed together under the table. Conversation flowed easier now, weaving between old memories and small admissions. He told me about sneaking beers in high school, about the time he almost got caught. I told him about the summer I spent practically living at the ranch, about how the horses had become a kind of escape. He listened, really listened, his hand absently resting near mine on the table. There was no rush to define anything. No pressure to name what we were or where it was going. Just the quiet rhythm of being near him, closer than we'd ever been allowed to be. When night came again, we didn't even pretend about the bed. He climbed in first, patting the space beside him with a small, shy smile. I slid in, my body buzzing with awareness, though the air felt gentler this time. We lay side by side, a careful inch of space between us that neither seemed eager to close, but neither widened either. In the dark, his voice came, soft and uncertain. So, where do we go from here? I turned my head toward him, though I couldn't see his face clearly. I don't know. He let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh. Me neither. We didn't say more than that. We didn't have to. Because for the first time, the not knowing didn't feel like a cliff. It felt like a beginning. Morning came quiet and golden, the kind of light that seeped gently through the cabin windows, dust motes drifting in the glow. I woke to find Ethan still asleep beside me, his arm folded beneath his head, his face turned toward me. His hair was a mess, sticking in half a dozen directions, and his lips were parted just slightly, soft, unguarded. For a moment I didn't move. I just let myself look. There was no storm outside, no weight pressing in, no fear of what I might lose. Only him, breathing slow and steady, in the same space where I'd always wanted him to be. I slipped out of bed quietly, making my way to the little kitchenette. The kettle hissed to life, filling the cabin with the low whistle of rising steam. When I turned, he was awake, watching me from the bed with sleepy eyes. Morning, he murmured, his voice gravelly from sleep. Morning, I said, setting 2 mugs on the counter. Coffee or tea? Coffee, he answered without hesitation, then smiled faintly. Though I'll take it however you make it. You're the expert here. I poured for both of us, bringing his mug over. He sat up, the blanket pooling around his waist, his shoulders bare where his shirt had slipped. When our fingers brushed as I handed him the cup, neither of us pulled away right away. Thanks, he said, his voice softer than the steam rising between us. We sipped in silence, but it wasn't like before. It wasn't heavy. It was calm. Familiar, yet different, like the rhythm of something we'd already been practicing for years, only now it had a name. After a while, Ethan set his mug down and leaned back on his hands. His eyes caught mine, steady, searching. So, yesterday wasn't a dream, right? My heart stumbled, but I managed to shake my head. No, not a dream. He nodded slowly, almost to himself. Good. The word lingered in the air, warm and sure. Without thinking, I reached out, letting my hand rest lightly against his. This time there was no hesitation. His fingers curled around mine, deliberate, certain, as if he'd been waiting for permission to do it all along. We sat like that for a long while, no big declarations, no promises we weren't ready to make. Just the quiet weight of our hands together, the sound of rain-washed air drifting through the open window, the unshakable sense that something had shifted. Eventually he chuckled, low and almost embarrassed. So, what happens when we go back? When we're not here? I thought about it, about the world waiting beyond the cabin, with its questions and its noise. And then I squeezed his hand gently. I don't know. But I want to find out. With you. His gaze softened, the corner of his mouth tilting upward. Yeah. Me too. The simplicity of it nearly undid me. Later we stepped outside together, the ground still damp from the storm, the air sharp and clean. He reached for my hand again, not hidden, not hesitant, and I let him take it. The warmth of his palm against mine was grounding, steady, more real than anything I'd dared to imagine. We walked toward the stables like that, side by side, the space between us finally closed. And as the sunlight broke across the fields, I realized that love hadn't arrived in some grand moment, or a perfect confession. It had crept in quietly, in laughter and silence, in glances that lasted too long, in the weight of his arm in the dark. Something had begun. Something real. And that's how something real began between us. But tell me, if you were in my place, would you have told your best friend how you felt, or kept it a secret forever? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your side of the story. Don't forget to like this video if you felt the connection, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this.